on the computer. Go. Right, so Anne, you're the one who's the class SWAT. What have you managed to look up this week about Afghanistan?
To be honest, I've done nothing this week, and I've done reading on other things, but I haven't read anything about Afghanistan. I can't help you there.
Me and Margaret absolutely appalled. You always do every single week. You never let us down, and this week you have.
And that's right. It's a shame, isn't it? But you know, things go wrong sometimes.
Yeah, things go wrong all the time. Exactly. Right, Margaret, it's over to you. You've got to save the situation.
Well, I don't know. Have you heard of Rory Stewart?
I thought he was a comedian.
Rory Stewart. He was a Conservative MP. He was up at Penrith.
Correct.
But he's been to Afghanistan many times. He's written books and articles, and I saw a little video. I think it was on YouTube.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the history of Afghanistan and about the battle in 1831, I think it was, when British soldiers went in from India, one of the battalions from India, and only one man survived out of God knows how many thousands.
Completely wiped out.
3,500, I think it was.
Yeah,
oh, no, come on, you've been fucking up now.
Just one man survived.
And he turned out to be not a man. He actually had a sex change, and that was politically correct. Right, so we're going to get straight to it. And by the way, you look really hot tonight, Margaret.
You like my sailor's jumper?
I really do. It suits you. It sort of goes with the rhythm of your life.
Oxfam, £2.
The thing is,
Bargain of the year.
At least they've washed it, ironed it, right? And I know somebody used to do that. They used to buy something from Oxfam for 50p, and then they used to take it back to washed, and they'd they'd back again for 50p again.
I've heard students used to do that.
It's a good idea, actually. It's actually quite economical. So the reason why I've got to be probably, and you should be looking at an image now in front of you. The reason why I'm saying I've got to probably be a little bit careful in what I say, because this could get very political tonight, and it's still fresh, and it's still raw, because we really don't know what's going on in Afghanistan still. But if we take away everything and just focus on the history and archaeology, the story is not a good one. And Afghanistan itself has suffered from constant invasions, the British being one, a few times in the 1800s, actually. I was going to say the 1830s again, but more than once in the 1800s, and actually before that. So we've got that instability. We've got the construction of the state. Then we've got in 1979, we've got an invasion from Russia to back the government there, and that goes to pot. So when you think about archaeology, it hasn't had much time to develop properly. And then what you then have, you have the Russians pulling out. And for a short period of time, there's a pseudo-democratic government, and then the Taliban take over. I think it's in 1996. They're ousted out of power by 2001. The museum comes back in order again, and after a decade, archaeological work is taking place, and now after a decade, all that has to stop. It's very disappointing because it could hold. It could hold so much information that the world has been deprived of. Detail of the Buddhist paintings at Mian, the oldest known oil painting in the world. So I'm probably going to look at lots of the information that we've got here from the slides, and just making sure that again we need just to keep that P very, very low. When I was doing my my postgraduate diploma with the University of Leicester, it was part of a Master of Arts course. We were very much into looking at the destruction of archaeology from around the world. And because I was doing that as a module at university, I got very political. And what I was seeing was that in a close period of a decade, museums were being looted, statues were being blown up. And I'm not just talking about museums being looted in Afghanistan. Museums would eventually be looted by the Americans and then Iraqis, actually in Iraq. So we would be seeing the collapse of Iraqi museums and Iraqi sites. This was in 2003, 2001, the destruction of large tracts of Afghani history, and then we hope to see an end, and then we see the breakdown of order in Egypt. Was it in 2011, 2012? We see Tunisia going up in flames. We see Libya going up in flames. We then see Syria going up in flames, but thankfully the Syrian government did not fall and did not allow most of its museums to be looted. So it's a good thing that that the Syrian government still remains in power in Syria. Again, let's not get political, because you'll soon see what side in history I level on. Go on from that. So Begram, glass sent to Paris after being uncovered. So look at the quality of the glass there. And Afghanistan, without even looking at my notes, we know, and we can feel, and we get that sense that Afghanistan is on the crossroads of civilization. It's along the Silk Route. So you've basically got to go through Afghanistan to get from China, or any trade from Japan if it's coming across land, Mongolia. You've got to use Afghanistan. It's a crossroads, right? And then you've got the close assimilation with the likes of Pakistan, which is actually India. I'm going to be smited down by all the Muslims on the planet. Up until 1947, Pakistan was actually India, right? Until partition. So you've got, and obviously whatever's going on up in the north, we'll forget that. It's the Hindu Kush and all that cold stuff, right? You've seen Carry On Up the Khyber, a bit like that, but filmed in Wales. Anyway, so I just want to give you a few facts, and then it gets depressing. And hopefully we can learn a little bit about this world. So, being that India borders, okay, old India, that's where we'll leave it. India borders on Afghanistan. Those that have controlled India, being not only the British, being the French, were the ones, and the British going into Afghanistan to undertake the burden of uncovering the history and big archaeology of Afghanistan. And one thing that was being noted, very important point, is obviously you've got this glass being shown here. Afghanistan being on that Great Silk Route, which was very active from 100, 200 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, and then into the 500-600s without any problems from Islam and Christianity and so on. And it's been reported. Like, I remember two things in my head. It's just coming to me now. It's being reported that there were monasteries that were full of gold, full of silks, treasure-filled monasteries reported by the French and the British archaeologists, antiquarians. We're not going to give a date to that, but it's obviously from the late 1700s, 1800s, and so on. Now, inspiring Rudyard Kipling's book, The Man Who Would Be King, and it's one of the finest films ever made in the 1970s, I will say, with Sean Connery and Michael Caine. It's a brilliant film. That's all about, it's all about the wealth of Afghanistan, and it's all about the infighting. It's quite apt, really. And it talks about these two pseudo fictitious sergeants who go into Afghanistan to make their fortune, only to meet one of the individuals who was in the last of the party that had actually sort of done an expedition in Afghanistan. And there's all these wonderful things in it. It's great. But I think portraying in that film was actually another side of Afghanistan's history. That very link between Roxanne, Queen, who married Alexander the Great, who was from Afghanistan. And there, what you do find, okay, and I've just got to chuck the cat off the table. Go on. What you do find is that you see that Afghanistan is a cradle of information. It's just trying to put it together. The word Kushan Empire brings in, it's a Kushan Empire, which might mean nothing at this stage tonight, but we're just going to chuck that one in, the Kushan Empire. And some of the world's oldest known oil paintings. Yeah, let's just look at it again. Some of the world's oldest known oil paintings are to be found in Afghanistan, oil-based paintings. And obviously what they then see is oil-based paintings on some beautiful Greek Orthodox paintings in regards to lots of churches that do survive still in Greece and Cyprus. But that's sort of coming in a little bit later. But you have some paintings dating back to 600 years AD. So these some of the oldest known oil painters, but not the oldest, but some of the oldest known oil painters from the Bamiyan Valley. And the Bamiyan Valley is famous for the Bamiyan Buddhas that were destroyed by the Taliban in 2001. Now, let's try and not be political. I do struggle with Islam, but then again, I struggle with Christianity. I struggle with the madness of extreme Islam, and I struggle with the madness of extreme Christianity. So I'm not going on one biased or the other. And extreme Christianity, you could blame the Christians for burning the libraries at Alexandria, and Christians going out destroying places of Muslim worship. And then you could say that the Muslims are doing it. Some of the extreme Muslims are actually seeing that anything that doesn't fit in with the teachings of their holy book should be destroyed. Even if it's even some forms of Islamic places of worship are to be destroyed in some of the eyes of fanatical extreme Islamic thought. Now, the Bamiyan statues themselves are part of what we want to talk about today, but only part. And this is very bitty today. So the tour of the Buddha of Bian before and after its destruction, there it is. It's all gone. Right, it's all gone. They've tried to reconstruct it, and therefore, whatever they've done to reconstruct it will now then again be destroyed again by the Taliban. So one of the big interests that I had when I was doing my university stuff back in 2001, 2002, 2003, 4, was at that time I used to sort of believe that artifacts should be offered back to the countries that they were actually originally taken from. But at the same time, I'm seeing in the news that lots of the archaeology of some of these countries are actively being destroyed. So if we had sent these items back, they'd have been destroyed anyway. It's like a bit like the benign bronzes going back to Nigeria. Are they going to be safe? Is Nigeria going to have some kind of civil war? Or are they going to be looted from the museums again and they were safe in the West? All these arguments. And it was argued that what right have we got in the West to tell these people that they can't destroy their history because it's their history? But then again, there's another counter argument to say, but it's not actually their history. It's a history that existed before this religion occurred. And you've got all these arguments going on. But I can trump that with a MasterCard. This is in regards to the history of our planet. And therefore, everybody's got a right to that history. This is why UNESCO is set up. This is why UNESCO is set up to tell the government that they cannot build a tunnel under Stonehenge, because it's a World Historic Site. And if you build a tunnel under Stonehenge, then it loses its world status. So you could say that the first major archaeological surveys of Afghanistan began after the British East India Company moved into the region. So this is going to be in the early part of the 1800s, if not the late 1700s, because the East India Company, if anyone's ever watched the series Sharp, they will know that that if I get, hang on, let me get this right. Yeah, in the later one of the later episodes of the Sharp series, he was actually in India with the British East India Company. No, he was in India with the British Army, but the British East India Company had its own army, right? So in the British Empire, there was the official British Army, and then there was the British East India Company Army. Both fought alongside each other. They had the same aims and ambitions. They were both run by British officers, but eventually they was all amalgamated into one army. So the British East India Company was actually a trading company with its own army. So it would go into places to trade, but they would go in with an army at the same time. Unlike the British Army, if the British Army went in there, it would go in for conquest. There's a slight difference. So the British East India Company were in Afghanistan at least by the 1800s, early 1800s. Along with the British Army, they began to uncover treasures of Afghanistan's ancient history by around 1839, 1842, with the first Anglo-Afghan War, which was mentioned earlier on by our wonderful, was it Drina? I can't remember. During the period of antiquity, the British envoy by the name of James Lewis abandoned his post for the British East India Company and headed north. And in doing so, headed north to understand and record lots of the history and archaeology of the landscape. This was before 1839. This was 1834. And he visited and he recorded 50 cultural sites in Afghanistan. 50 cultural sites in Afghanistan that the people go to. He recovered treasures and artifacts. This is really important. This individual again, James Lewis, recovered these treasures and artifacts, and he sent them to the British Museum in London, where they still exist today. Now, if they had gone to a museum in Afghanistan, gotta be very careful now to stay away from politics. If they went to a museum in Afghanistan, most of those artifacts would have been destroyed. So he went to all these different monasteries and all these different cultural sites. He gave us lots of opportunities to understand Afghanistan from the artifacts and the records that he made of the sites that he visited. Remember, it's 1834. He had his sketchbooks, right? He didn't have a camera. The camera wouldn't come along for at least another 30 odd years. So he wasn't able to take photographs, but we've got these records, which is great. We're very thankful to him. Again, an Afghan person standing there. What right? Okay, let's have a conversation, Afghan person. Not Taliban or Mujahideen. Let's just have a conversation. And what right have I got to argue that we should keep these artifacts in the British Museum? I can argue that it's for world cultural heritage that we've got a record of Afghanistan. These are not artifacts that are just for the British nation. They're artifacts for the worldwide nation. Have I won the argument? Again, I'm not really sure I have. However, we're going to go on to a little bit about the French, and this is very bitty today because what I'm trying to do is open up a subject, which there's got lots of things about destruction and things once there, and it's that type of thing today. So if we go back to this wonderful image, and we're staying on again, look at that there. Now, what we do see is that obviously the French are milling about and the British are milling about, but what is happening is further archaeological research would not be conducted in the region until the French signed a 30-year contract with a newly independent Afghanistan in 1921, 1922. And you're just thinking, who are they newly independent from? Well, that's quite interesting. Given the exclusive right of archaeological research in the nation to France, so what's happening is that there was a great relationship between the French and the Afghan people at that stage. And this item, the Begram glass, is still on display in Paris, probably in the Louvre. And what we do see is that the French were going to go keep working in Afghanistan in 1978, 1979, but it never really happened because of the war. One clause of this original agreement from the 1920s said that the archaeological findings, except for gold, were to be divided evenly between France and Afghanistan until 1965, when all findings would be declared property of Afghanistan. So you can imagine over this period, it was only supposed to last 20 years, but the French kept working there. And you can imagine that, that we've got a good representation of artifacts being found in Afghanistan being sent to France. So the French and the British have quite large collections. Now, the big question is, if the Taliban applied to the Louvre for its artifacts back, should the Louvre actually give them back? And the answer is no, because we probably know what's going to happen to them. So we're looking after them for the safekeeping. And then there's a counter argument, but it doesn't actually belong to the French. Anyway, yes, it does, because agreement was made that half the artifacts are divided amongst the French nation and the Afghan nation. So technically they do belong to France. That's the argument we're going to use. So we do see obviously this very prosperous landscape, and we do see that lots of effort is made on sites associated with the Silk Route. So sites towards the north of the country are going to be associated with the Silk Route. They're going to be very wealthy sites, Buddhist monasteries dating back obviously 600-500, those types of times, and even the Kushan kingdom, and a sense of the Hellenistic periods within Afghanistan. Well, again, that's the link with Alexander the Great, because what we do find, Hellenism, this sense of the Greek world, is being introduced to the wonderful Afghani people over 2,300 years ago. So we have sites such as Hadda, which are being excavated, and the Hadda site 1926 some of this stuff is very vague tonight, so I'm trying to give you a bit of an overview. The Hadda site, which was being excavated by the French archaeologists, uncovered 15,000 artifacts and fragments. The Hadda site included 8 monasteries and various other, and you can imagine these 15,000 artifacts are being divided amongst the Afghan and the French nation. So, that's quite a lot of artifacts. The artifacts that ended up into Kabul in the museum, most of them are now gone and been destroyed. There was, interesting enough, a fact will come up a little bit later, that the Taliban, when they took over Kabul in 1996, the Kabul museum was actively looted over a period of about 3, 4, 5 years. People were going in there just taking things, and it was a free-for-all. They were burning records, all types of different terrible things were going on. And obviously, at that stage, the Bamiyan statues themselves were in awe of many people, and there were lots of ivories and glass objects, like the ones we're seeing, but the French were giving way to people exploring Afghanistan. Afghanistan was being exploited by nations who were seeing how wealthy this country's archaeology and history is. So not only do we see an exploitation by the British and the French, and people going in there saying, "Oh, we'll have a bit of this." The Italians, the Germans, the Japanese, the Indians, the United States, and even the Russians were going into Afghanistan, looting their history and archaeology. Let's halt this. Am I actually saying that this is all right that they go in there, taking the artifacts and putting them in their museums? I should be saying that they should have been training Afghanistani people to care for and look after their history and give their history meaning. Now, there's an image I'm going to show you. We'll just go through a few images a minute. This little image here, nice one. There you go. A nation stays alive when its culture stays alive. Without getting too political, folks, by the French and the British and India and the USA and the Russia and so on, and these countries go into Afghanistan, just taking what they like, not training local people to respect and love their history. That's exactly what happens. Culture goes away, people lose respect for their culture. A nation stays alive when its culture stays alive. And when you start taking that culture away, you devalue that people's sense of identity. Identity is very, very important. So what we should have done is, back in the 1820s, we should have actually started finding local people and saying, this is what your history means. Build this up. We'll train you how to be archaeologists and historians, right? We'll change that. We'll train the next generation. And I'm going to say something that might be inappropriate at this minute, but the same thing can be said for Africa. Lots of native peoples in Africa have not been trained to respect their history and archaeology. Because what we've done, we've gone into Africa and we've taken and we've looted sites such as Great Zimbabwe and Mapungwage, and we've looted sites in Nigeria. We've looted sites all over the place, and we've taken these goods out to the country without actually saying to the local people, this is your history, and we're going to help you understand it, and then you can help us understand it. It's a two-way thing. It's not big Western ideas. It's a two-way thing. So it's a big struggle to try to articulate the history and archaeology of Afghanistan when it's so being kicked in the teeth all the time. We are all to blame for this. We're not to blame for those artifacts in the museum. However, we are to blame for not making the people see how important their history is to protect that archaeology and history in the museums, such as at Kabul. And what I'm talking about there is exactly the same thing as happened in Syria. Lots of archaeologists in Syria were seeing that their archaeology was under threat by those abominable people from ISIL, Islamic State. And the archaeologists were going into their museums and burying the archaeology. They were taking it over to Damascus. Some archaeologists were shot by firing squads because they were not telling ISIS where these artifacts were. That's because those locally trained archaeologists saw how important their history is to give those people a sense of identity and meaning and understanding. And that's what's lacking in the likes of modern day Afghanistan. I've got every right to say that, because we know the positive effects that happen in the likes of Syria, where they've managed to save big scores of their history and their archaeology. So this terrible thing by 1979, we're seeing a massive sense of instability. As I said at the beginning, you've got all these wars, but then again, I've basically said you've had this research going on, but then again, it's not been stable research. It's been a scramble for Afghanistan. You've already heard about the scramble for Africa in 1878. This is the scramble for Afghanistan. This is all these. We're doing it today. But the Russians are thinking they'll have a bit of Afghanistan now. The Americans are going. Chinese are thinking as well. The Pakistanis are thinking as well. The Indians are going in there as well. Everyone's having a bit. That's exactly the same thing that's happened with history and archaeology. It's that scramble for Afghanistan. Afghanistan in 1979 and has been slow to resume. It's re-coring, it's rebasing with its history and its archaeology. So again, let's look at these Bamilian statues. Let's try and understand what I'm blithering on about. And so here we go. Let's just have a little look at these. Look at that. Whoa, it's not there now. Doesn't exist. It's not. There are two statues, but there's other statues as well. This is one of the ones, the great one that was blown up. And I remember looking at this in the class not so long ago as well. And there it is. It's a completely empty zone there. There it is, and there it was. Just to look at how it once was then. So now it's trying to. I can understand why the Taliban are blowing these things up, because they want to. They're using their holy book, and they're saying actually this does not agree with the rules of our religion, but that's not exactly true. It doesn't go out. Islam says you should have respect for other religions. It doesn't, and if you're blowing up statues associated with Buddha, it doesn't actually tie in. It's just the way it's been interpreted. But you could actually interpret it in a different way. You could actually say that the reason why the Taliban are doing this is that they want to they want to get rid of the people's sense of identity. You deny a people's sense of identity. And then they'll lose hope, and the only hope that they got is the Taliban. Now, something very different is that the Mujahideen, which is very different from the Taliban, and what we're gonna see. I'm going into politics now. We're going to see a massive civil war between the Mujahideen and the Taliban, and it's going to be an absolute bloodbath. But that is coming. But the Soviet-Afghan war saw the Hadar site that we've already mentioned being completely leveled and looted for artifacts from a number of sources throughout the Soviet-Afghan war. Artifacts were being looted so that they can actually be traded on to actually buy arms and munition. Looting was also rife during this conflict and continued through the civil wars that broke out after Soviets withdrew their forces in 1989. Into the present day, with ongoing conflicts in the region, the Taliban in 2001, under the orders of Mullah Muhammad Omar, called for the destruction of the famous Buddhas of Bamia, and they were reduced to rubble. Today, unfortunately, we did have stability up until a few weeks ago, but it was hoped that tourists could go to this location, and there were 3D light projections into where this is now. So it'd be like a reconstruction, so people could actually see a 3D light projection into this. But obviously, that's going to come and go, and that's going to disappear. We do hope that the Taliban are going to be different, but that's to be seen. That's to be seen. So again, the Bamilian statues. I've got a little note in front of me which I actually want to do. So if we move around with my images, and hang on a minute, where's my little image? Oh, there we go. That's the one. Oh yes, heritage under threat there. But they had been doing identifications of sites, but this actually shows the level of looting at one site, and look at all those holes being dug at the site, complete looting and destruction. And that's in 2010. So even with American forces and allied forces in the country, lots of the looting wasn't stopped. But there have been methodical archaeological excavations going on across Afghanistan. But then again, that's on the backdrop of the level of looting going on. And there we go, we got this. So this little bit of a chart, which we'll actually come on to, heritage under threat. You can see that you've got a range of different sites there. And you've got Herat, that would be familiar to you, some of you guys. Kandahar, site of a major site, that used to be the home of the Taliban, and you've obviously, you know about Kabul. The Bamiyan statues is very near Kabul. There you go, Kabul. And you've got Kamdekh, and Jalalabad, that'll be familiar. And that site Hadda that we've mentioned. There's Hadda, the site that was completely leveled and destroyed because of the war between Afghanistan and Russia. You've got a few other places on there as well that might actually be familiar. But I just want to look at my little bits of notes here. And saving Afghans' heritage. Now, this one thing, saving Afghans' heritage. So from 1998 to 2008, this is a little bit of a story. So following a quarter century of warfare, Afghanistan faces a cultural heritage crisis marked by the looting of the National Museum in 1998, beginning in 1996, and the destruction of the Bamiyan Buddhas in 2001. Now, you know, I used to have high and mighty ideas. I used to think that we could save every single piece of archaeology on the planet. I was even the editor of a magazine called Archaeology World Report. Yeah, I've done this. I've studied this, and now I look and I think that the situation is so bad that archaeologists now have to face their fight battles that they can either win or at least do something. And what I'm talking about there is that the archaeological universities in this country are now being cut back. There's about 3 or 4 archaeological departments that are being kicked into touch as of September. So we're losing those trained archaeologists. The British government do not see archaeology as being integral to the planning system anymore, which is absolutely tragic. And who are we to say that, you know, our history and archaeology is important, because we even close museums in this country. But we've got to see that archaeology is important because it is a sense of identity. It does mean something. There were attempts made in 1998 by some of the archaeologists to rescue some of the archaeological museum before the Taliban nicked it all. And the stuff that they couldn't take out, it was just looted and sold on the open market. These types of artifacts that you can actually see in front of you are some of those artifacts that actually made on to the open market. The international reaction to first reports of pre-Islamic artifacts being destroyed by the Taliban. But in 2001, it was ordered that anything that was wrong in Afghanistan was to be destroyed. At the same time, people had their computers being smashed up and radios and all the rest of it. It was to be a completely backwards world. It could be said to be state-sponsored cultural terrorism, i.e., with the blowing up the Bamiyan statues in 2001. Report after report, a booming antiquities trade strips the country of its heritage. 2002. Again, talking about Afghanistan. The race to save Afghanistan's culture. 2002. A Swiss museum tries to protect what remains of Afghans' cultural heritage. So you've got museums from the West going in saying, we've got to do something about this. We have to do something about this. We've got to stop this going on in Afghanistan. And this is the deep pain that I still feel every single day, right? I had an opportunity to be in the Baghdad Museum at the time it was captured by American troops. I wouldn't be talking to you today because I would have tried to do something about it, right? Double standards. People talk about Afghanistan and say that their history and archaeology is great when American troops actively loot the Baghdad Museum in 2003. And the Americans used places like and the old walls of Baghdad and the site of Nemrud and Nineveh as places to store tanks and all sorts of bloody things. So, you know, the West is destroying the archaeology of Iraq when at the same time they're saying that we should do something about Afghanistan. It's double standards. There are no real standards in history and archaeology anymore. It's a real struggle. You know, I get people coming to me and saying, right, can you help us stop the destruction of this archaeological site? And half the time I say no. I haven't got the time to give you my backing. And Michelle cringes in the background and says, but yeah, this is really important. We should do something. But we don't have the resources to fight all these battles, have we, Michelle? Exactly, we don't. We don't have the resources to fight all these battles. Thank you for the tea. But since 2008, they've been trying to do more research. They've been trying to go out there. This is when we looked at the beginning. We looked at the oldest oil paintings in the world, and they found a big complex in the Bamiyan Valley. Interestingly enough, as they were trying to put some of these bits of the statue together, they started finding some of these really old oil paintings in a maze of caves at the Bamiyan Valley where the Bamiyan statues used to stand. And I think what we could say is the impact of war upon Afghanistan's culture, cultural heritage, has been absolutely, you know, there's no words for it. In fact, I'm going to make a statement which is not in front of me at all. I'm going to say at least in the Second World War, lots of the archaeology in the museums was saved in Germany. Lots of the archaeology from Russia was saved, and lots of the archaeology from museums in France, Belgium, and Denmark was saved. We didn't lose. What we're talking about, what we are talking about in Afghanistan, if you want to compare it with the Second World War, is the bombing of the British Museum with all its contents going up in flames. That's what we're talking about. That didn't happen because most of that stuff got out there and was placed in store somewhere. That's what we're talking about. How tragic would it be to have lost the British Museum? This is exactly what's happened in Afghanistan. We've got echoes, and it's very important to try and make government see that history is identity. And even for the Taliban have to be convinced that for them to try and make peace with the people need to still have their identity. They don't, if they want the people turning against them again, they should not blow up their museums and they should not destroy their artifacts. So much has been written. There was a recent piece actually issued today. I haven't actually read it. It goes back to this image. So if we go back to this image here, and I'm gonna read some of the messages on here because I think Jessica's been on top form here. So here we go. Jessica wants me to read out all this. All right then, here we go. So as we got this in front of us, here we go. Right. It is global history. It holds international importance. Agreed. And Jessica makes a comparison with Wales. I also think the lack of teaching of Welsh history is a way that prevents Welsh children from growing to love their culture. Exactly, that's what we're seeing in Afghanistan. English history is only taught in my old school to this day, and the younger generation knows nothing of their history, and I have no respect of it, as Wales is viewed as a backward country. Similar, you could say the same about Afghanistan. This loses the importance of Welsh history, loses the importance of Afghans history as well. As you said, a nation stays alive when its culture stays alive. Well, our culture in Wales is really ceasing to exist. Afghanistan is on the more extreme edge. Very little of their history and archaeology is surviving, which is why we must fight for our history and identity. Agree with you there. but basically, history is important, and the pain of those who love their history in Afghanistan, which is now being lost, is difficult to put into words. Erasing the identity of culture feeds into unrest, as we've already said. I said that. Removing identity is sometimes done to Wales, with our villages gone. The Welsh knot makes Wales dependent on England, and this is something that should not be going on anywhere in this day and age. But again, you've got to teach people that their history is important in that locality. And I'll read this again. This is all we flow quite well, don't we, Jessica, on these things. History teaches us lessons for the future, and if you are proud of your history, 100%, then you are reading history wrong, but you should not erase history, as it helps the world grow. So hang on, history teaches us lessons for the future, and if you are proud of your history, hang on, right, so you mean, so if you're proud of your history and all the mistakes, you shouldn't be proud of it, you should always question it. That's what I mean. Thank you for that. I read that wrong, Jessica. So it's that point, you've got to have a history there, you've got to look at history, and you've got to learn from its lessons. Everything's relevant, but you cannot erase history. You must not erase history. And again, this is Jessica again. I also want to protect every piece of archaeology, and seeing it being destroyed breaks my heart. I can only suggest records, if obtained, should be treated like gold dust. I am convinced that the Taliban destroying culture is going against international humanitarian law. This law sees the need for the respect of culture. An international legal framework needs to be designed more clearly for cultural property protection. Yeah, they are a bit obsessive, Jessica, those messages, but they were really, really useful. And I'm going to just show this on the screen now. This is actually being written now. I haven't read it, so I'm going to just show you this. I'm going to have a break. So again, this is a lot in trying to put a lot into this today, and I'm either failing or getting somewhere. But all these different sites there, it's saying the Bamiyan statues. There we go, a Bamiyan. There you go. On the ancient China-Europe Silk Route, it is famous for the 2 Buddhist statues that are now gone, and 1,000 Buddhist caves with that wonderful art in. I can't read the rest of it. Here we go. Ghazni, where's Ghazni on here? Ghazni. Oh, there, Ghazni. There we go, Ghazni. In the middle of the country there. Ghazni, Ashoka is said to have built 10 stupas and Deva temples. It has a Buddhist complex. So we've got lots of these things, and this place Hadra on the border with Pakistan. There's many sacred Buddhist spots dating from the 100s to the 600s are found here, but until recently, so lots of this stuff has been destroyed, and we've got terrible things going on, and we've got to somehow try and get people really objectively looking at their history like this. So we'll do a bit of this after the break. We've got another little bit of an article to do there, and this one here as well. I'm not sure we're going to be able to get through all of this, but I'm sure we can give this a blast and see how this goes. So let's stop now, and let's see if there are any questions. I know what Pete's going to say. His grandson's been there. He's got a trunk full of artifacts in his attic. I don't want to know, Pete. Right, Anne.
Well, very depressing, isn't it? I mean, it's still going on, and
I can send you a knife.
Pardon?
If it is that depressing, I know I can send you a knife.
Yeah, it's yes. Well, I'm not that depressed, but I do think.
Well,
I can be depressed all the while about the news, the world news, or even our news, and I think to see something destroyed as much as that was, for the usual reasons,
yeah.
You know, and which will still carry on going on, unfortunately.
But can I just make a comment, right? I'm sure we've all been completely naive. I'm sure that we've all felt that the destruction of history and archaeology is a very rare thing, as I used to think.
Mm-hmm.
I used to think that you go to the British Museum and you look at all the stuff in the British Museum. Artifacts are safe in the Cairo Museum.
Yeah.
Everything's safe in China and Japan, and the museums in In Peru, everything's fine. There's money and all these wonderful things. But suddenly you then start to hit 2001 and another reality hits you.
Yeah.
The world is not a
I,
nice place.
I listened to a lecture by Archaeologists about the hiding of history in Africa, which is a similar, you know, it's happening in lots of places, isn't it?
Yes. And again, it's all about that key. I remember getting very, very excited a few years ago. I was doing a talk on some tablets, a load of tablets that had been found in Iraq. And I remember that there was Iraqi archaeologists into studying and recording these tablets all the way back into the 1860s, 1870s. And they really loved this stuff. And I started to think that my complete arrogance, that people in Africa and South America weren't interested in history and archaeology. And as I opened up with, I said, that was going to be controversial. There are people out there who really love their history and archaeology from these countries.
Well, you've told us about some of these people when you've taken us around the world looking at various things. You've told us about some of the archaeologists, haven't you, who've struggled to find out these things.
Like Andronicus with Vergina and Philip II and Alexander the Great in the 1950s. And yes, exactly. And they are out there. It's then saying to them, as Zawi Hawass is actually saying in Egypt, right? He's come back again big time. He had his time as Minister of Antiquities, then obviously changed in 2011, 2012. He's come back big time. He's a local guy. He's a local guy on the streets of Egypt, right? He knows his stuff, right? And he is saying, we've got this wonderful history in archaeology, and he's the local boy, right? Which is great. We've got to have more local boys and local girls like him who are very much into saying this is our history, and only then can Jessica get her wish and hope that all these artifacts remain in these countries to be safe, because you've got people protecting them. I think the greatest example of this is that I really wish I remember his name, but it was in 1944. There was an Italian archaeologist who was director of Pompeii. He stood on the walls with a gun, shooting at the Americans. They were coming towards Pompeii, right? And he turned around. He was shot at the buttocks, right? Buttocks. He jumped on his bike and he rode off into the distance. And an Italian archaeologist. I love that.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to say it as well. That I need to get the right context. This is an appalling thing to say, but archaeology and history can be sometimes more important than human life, because after warfare and after death, there's a need to get your identity back. And if you don't have any identity, you're wandering the streets forever. History and archaeology is that important. It's more important than human life in some circumstances. And archaeologists have gone out there and tried to save the archaeology at the risk of their own lives, because they know how important it is. We're not talking about Western archaeologists here. We're talking about Afghani archaeologists.
Yes, I remember seeing it on the news about one of their archaeologists who was trying to save the museum, and I think he got killed.
Yeah, exactly.
The work he was doing.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So anyway, nothing from Pete except he's got a nice comfy seat. David, babes?
No, thank you.
Andy?
No, thanks.
Gina?
No, thank you.
And Margaret?
Well, I agree with what you said about them destroying artifacts and that to deny people's sense of identity. I think that's very true. I can imagine how devastated I would feel if our treasured places were attacked.
Yeah, I agree. I'd just like to mention one thing as well, as I didn't mention earlier on. we've been chatting with an educational body in Wales, and we might be offering next year on the excavation an actual accredited qualification on the archaeological excavation in West Wales. And if that's the case, if you're very good, you'll have an archaeological qualification from the excavation.
Would I get a golden trowel?
You get a slap on the backside. No, you're not getting a golden trowel. What else do you want? Do you want gold or something? Do you know what I mean? What else do you want?
Gonna be
Right, okay.
one of those kinky digs, is it then, with slapping on the backside?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And do you know what? I got so few belts in the house, right? I got my new belt here. Look at that.
Nice. And goats.
Look at that there. Whoa. With a nice old buckle on it. But on that note, I'm going to take a break. We'll have a break. We'll be back.
Okay.
Okay. Oh yeah, we better put the mic off as well, because you know what I'm like in the background. God, my language gets terrible. Anyway, I'll mute that. We'll have a 10-minute.
He's gone.
What do you call this? Mickey Mouse? I'm still here. I'm gonna go now.
Be like that then, Mickey.
There's not a lot you can say about this subject, really, is there? It's just, the whole thing is just so horrific from
Yes.
beginning to end.
Yeah.
Will it ever end? That's the thing. But you should listen to Rory Stewart. He's really interesting.
Wasn't he a minister out there?
Pardon?
Wasn't he in charge of something out in Afghanistan?
I'm not
I
sure.
know he did.
He lived
talked
over
about
there. Yeah, he knows everything about it.
Yeah,
The history, everything.
yeah.
He's very knowledgeable.
He was very upset about it all when it all
God, yeah.
went there.
He was in the military out there.
Was it? Is that what it was?
And then was a Conservative MP. And then, like you said, I think he was minister to do with something like that.
Yeah.
Was the Foreign Office or something, but then
Yeah.
resigned. I think didn't he stand as an independent for a while as well? But, I don't think he got elected last time round. But
I just remember seeing him when it was a battle for the leadership, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
Do you
Right.
remember they were all sat round on stools?
Yeah.
yes,
And I
did
thought
that,
he was
didn't
the
he?
best of the bunch.
Yeah.
But they said he was too casual because he loosened his tie.
Yeah.
I thought, how ridiculous.
Yeah.
He was the only one who had any realism in his.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a lot more. So he was facing the facts, where all the others were
Yeah.
telling us it was all going to be wonderful, and
Yeah.
and I think that's why he didn't win.
He was telling the truth, and they
There was a lot more
want the
truth.
truth, do
That's
they?
always dangerous. Yes.
Yes.
I remember a program about him when he was a student. He sort of walked all across that area and
Yes,
he
he
went to
did.
stay with people, didn't he? When he
Yeah.
was young,
Own,
that was
yeah.
where his interest started. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a strange one. He's Rory.
Who is Rory?
Yeah.
Oh, I think he's a bit eccentric.
It's not. Yeah. It's not. I don't. You know, walking across somewhere like that on your own is always a bit of a strange thing to do. So.
I mean, he went to Eton, didn't he, like the rest of them, but he's got a little bit of something extra. I think.
Yes, there is something else. There is more to him, isn't he? And he's such a funny little fella as well, isn't he?
Is he little?
Yeah, he's tiny.
He's
tiny.
skinny. He's
Yeah.
got skinny, bandy legs.
Yeah. It's like his
But,
collar never fits him, you know. But he does speak a lot of common sense. You're
Oh, he
absolutely right.
does. Yeah, he seems a bit more down with the people, doesn't he?
Yeah, got no
Yeah.
chance in politics then, has he?
No, exactly, which is that's the shame.
It
Yeah.
is.
It's like our Tim Farron is far too nice, isn't he?
Yeah.
To be a
I saw
leader.
him. He said hello to me the other day as he ran through the village.
He
Oh,
said hello
gosh.
to you.
Yeah.
Oh, well, he's a very friendly man. He
He is. I
wants you
thought,
on board.
He looks familiar. Who's in? I went, all right. And he goes, hello. And I thought, oh, it's Tim. Yeah.
Yeah. He was at our local art exhibition, wasn't
Yes,
he?
he was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was. That was in the afternoon, but he was running, and he was clearly had been doing quite a lot of running because he was quite hot. Because I know he does
Yeah.
do quite a bit of jogging. But
I've seen him doing the litter pick on the beach.
yes.
I mean, he's everywhere, isn't he?
Yeah.
Every
Maybe-
time you get the Gazette, it's where's Wally, really, isn't he? Which page is he going to turn up on?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same. It's a shame they don't. See, the Liberal Democrats in it. They tend to say common sense things and then don't get voted in.
Yeah, why do people vote for people that tell lies?
I don't know. That's a very good
I mean,
question.
it's
Because they
true.
tell them what they want to hear
Well,
rather
you think
than
that's what it is?
if they were getting the truth, they
Yeah.
wouldn't like it. They
Yeah.
want to be told it's all going to be great. Then,
oh dear.
I mean,
True.
it's what people want to believe, I think.
Mm.
It's all going to be fine. Right, you're in.
Yeah, wonderful. More than fine. It was all going to be wonderful.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But it wasn't.
Oh, my son raised, you know, he did it the Cross Bay Walk on Sunday.
Yes.
He raised nearly £800.
Oh, well
that's
done.
Wow.
Very
Yeah.
good.
That's
Isn't
really
that
good.
good?
Did he
Yeah.
enjoy
What
it?
was,
He did actually. He was so busy taking photographs. He took his fancy camera with him, and he was just at the back taking photographs of everything and everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, he said he felt a bit guilty, really, getting all that money off people because it was just rather a pleasant day out. It wasn't strenuous at all.
what was the walk for? What charity?
Cancer care.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
But he felt he should have suffered a little bit, but he didn't. It was just very pleasant.
Well, not if it. I mean, it can be as long as somebody's prepared to pay to do whatever it is. It's the raising of the money, isn't it?
Yeah,
That makes it
yeah.
to charity. Now, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent from his point of view, you know, if it raised the money, that was it.
Yeah. Hmm. Did you have a rescue that day, Andy? Later that day.
Which day did he go? Because
That was Sunday.
No, not Sunday. No, we had a nice quiet day on Sunday. Just the Saturday one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what was it on Saturday?
Oh, over at Silverdale, about 20 people cut off by the tide.
Oh my
20?
word.
The three initial ones were about a mile and a half out, standing on the edge of the channel with fishing, with the tide coming in around them.
Hey.
We had to get the hovercraft out from Morecambe and our jet ski out, and ridiculous. And then as we were
Stupid
doing
people.
that, more people were walking out into it and thinking, what are you doing? People.
What's your overriding feeling when that happens? Is it, oh, I must save these people, or silly buggers?
You don't really have time to think about how silly they are. You're just thinking about, right, how are we going to get these ones, because the tide's coming around behind them and they've got about 25 minutes, and with this, this will take this long to get here, and that'll take that long, and the jet skis it's too shallow for them to get there.
Yeah.
As long as they stand on the sandbank, they'll be all right for another half an hour, but then if they get stuck in the mud, they're dead. So
Do you
and then
go
you
out
think,
with a
It's a
loud
bit like our
hailer?
Sully
yes, we
Island.
did. Yeah, we did exactly that. Sorry, Pete. Yeah, we did exactly that. Went out with the loud hailer and got quite a lot of them back before they got wet. so,
Yeah.
Our Sully Island gets cut off by the tide,
yeah,
and it's only accessible for about 4 hours.
yeah.
Mm.
And people, they'll go out onto the island, and they're sitting out on the island having a picnic because it is a nice place. Then they see the tides come in. Oh my God, we're cut off. We can't go home.
Yeah,
Call the Coast Guard. Call the lifeboat.
yeah.
People have to go out and pick them up. I'd
Yeah.
leave them there and say, go, you come
No,
back,
you
walk back, when the
wouldn't.
tide goes back out.
You wouldn't.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's it. Just wait till the tide goes out and come back again.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like,
I've
what's
been
the
out there with
problem?
my grandsons fishing. We fish the tide in and fish it back out again, and then we walk back off.
Yeah.
Simple as that, you know. But these people, they get, as soon as they see the tide come across the causeway, oh dear, dear, come and get us, please.
Yeah.
Mm.
I expect Carl's been cut off by the tide over there a couple of times.
I bet he has. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, 9 o'clock.
9
And
o'clock.
all is well.
All's well. Yeah,
All is well.
I might as well let it go.
Yeah.
When did you first get interested in archaeology, Pete?
Well, through Carl and Hugh.
Oh, quite recent then.
Oh, about 10, 11 years, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Always interested in history. I've always looked for history. I mean, whenever I'm out abroad or wherever I go, I always go to the historical places like
Yeah.
Mycenae and Olympia and Pompeii and
Oh,
all these places. I always went to these places, but
yeah.
to actually sit and listen to it, it was when Hugh was doing the lectures in Asda in Cardiff. Linda got me to go there.
To where? Asda?
Asda, yeah. They Carl used their training room.
Oh, right.
He got that for free, I think.
Oh, that's good.
And Hugh, who was one of his lecturers, used to give the lectures. I used to go along and really enjoyed it.
Well,
And then,
we
of course,
just
I went up to Cannon Street and
yeah.
listened to the man himself.
Oh,
Yeah.
I must say my history lessons at school were pretty abysmal. From what I remember, it was just about dates of battles and kings and queens.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what I was like.
My history
I
teacher,
having
I
to learn
remember,
the
was a
corn
horrible
laws.
man.
I remember having to learn the corn laws, and we had to learn all the clauses and things. And I thought, do you know, I think it was about 3 years ago, I read the corn laws and understood them for the first time. And I'd done all that at school, and it went over my head.
You need to teachers with a bit of passion, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's true of any subject.
Well,
any
yeah, but
subject.
especially history. You know,
Mr.
there's a way
Shimmin.
of bringing it alive, isn't there?
Yeah.
Mr. Shimmin, our history teacher, had a bald head and always wore his gown. And he always leant there with his arms behind him, riding out the gown, looking like an eagle. And I
You
must
remember
admit,
what
he was
he
a
was-
horrible
What was he
teacher.
called? Can you remember his name?
Mr. Shimming, yeah.
Oh. Trying to remember what my history teacher was called. But they did used to wear gowns, didn't they? At my school, they
Yeah,
all
yeah,
wore
he wore the
Oh,
gown.
black gowns.
He was the only teacher there that always wore the gown.
Yeah.
And then there was one, the trigonometry teacher. He wore glasses, but somehow he could always see what was happening at the back of the class when he was at the chart, when he was at the blackboard.
Mm.
And he'd be writing on the blackboard, and somebody would talk in the back, and he turned around, and it could be either the chalk or the eraser would go at the person talking in the back. Yeah.
We had a
Somehow
chemistry
he had
teacher.
eyes in the back of his head.
We had a chemistry teacher, and the boys in there, I don't know why it was them, but they used to count the number of times he said He was always and he was so, and it became a sort of a competition to see which lesson is going to do the most in his speech. It was sort of very boring, you know, you might imagine.
We
Our
had one
chemistry
teacher,
teacher
the English teacher used to write on the blackboard, And she used to do the splits, sideward splits, as the chalk was going lower and lower down the blackboard. Her legs would go wider and wider and wider apart. Oh gosh.
Oh, dear.
Our chemistry teacher had a half a cricket bat,
Oh,
and he would have his initials in chalk on the cricket bat. And if you were misbehaving in class, you had a whack on the backside with this,
dear.
cricket bat, but it left his initials on your backside, and you had to keep them there for the rest of the day. But if you wiped them off, you got it again.
okay. Oh God.
It wasn't very. It didn't hurt a lot, but at least it was very
effective. Yeah.
Well, they did have the cane then. If you were really bad, you were sent.
Oh
to
yes,
the
yeah,
headmaster's
I had the
study.
cane.
I was never caned. I think it was mostly the lads.
Yeah,
But
I
it
did
just
have the
seems
cane.
barbaric.
I think it was.
now,
I think it was
doesn't
only the head who was allowed to do it. At the
Yeah, it
teachers.
Yeah.
was
It
only
was
the
only
head.
the head allowed to do it in our
was
school.
only
We used
the
to
head
get
that gave
whacked
the
with a
cane.
plimsoll quite regularly on the backside.
Well,
Now,
that's
our
quite
headmaster
appropriate.
got sacked for doing that. The girls.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, oh yes.
that's what Margaret used to enjoy, a bit of a smack with a plimsoll. Do you know, I did used to go to the headmistress with stuff down my trousers. This is what happened, right? I went to the headmistress with stuff packed down my trousers. Unfortunately, she did my knuckles.
We would always take our book to Miss Jones, a young head teacher, who was quite well built. I would put the book in front and get her to lean over it and see some décolletage.
Oh, right. Okay. Pete, you bloody perv. Right. Okay. Let's just crack on. So, I got to ask. So, Margaret and Drina, are your plans still to come to West Wales next year in the summer?
Well, that would be.
It would
Yeah.
be nice, wouldn't it, Drina?
Yeah, it would. Yeah.
Why are you just asking us?
Well, because Andy said he can't get a week off, but if we chuck a qualification at him, he might. Because what'll happen, you see, right? If Andy gets an archaeological qualification, it'll really annoy Claire because her qualifications are in the art field.
You'd
Right?
like an ology, wouldn't
Yeah,
you?
because the thing is, right? What is it? Claire's got a BA or a master's degree in art, but she hasn't got an archaeological degree. Could you imagine that? Andy getting some archaeological credits.
Could I get one?
No, we'll just give them to Andy.
Oh, that's not fair.
Yeah, no. Andy will get the special. What I'll do, Andy will get the full points just for turning up. Because Andy's got to have more than you because he's a bit, Anyway,
What?
I don't know what I'm on
A
about.
bit cleverer. He's a bit cleverer than what
I didn't
am.
say that. I really didn't say that at all.
But you insinuated.
Oh, I can insinuate what I like. Right. Okay. Anyway, let's go back to this now. So otherwise we'll be in here all night. Right. So I've forgotten what I'm doing. I've lost the plot. There's nothing new there, is there? Right. Okay. So I think the one thing is that on a positive note, back to this image. A nation stays alive when its culture stays alive, and with the word nation, nation can only be a nation when it's recognized by other nations, and that's a really important point. If a nation hasn't got a different, if a nation hasn't got an identity, then it's not really a nation. If a nation destroys its cultural heritage, doesn't safeguard it, then it can't really be recognized as different to be a nation. There's all those different aspects. So I think we've got to see the safeguarding of all aspects of Afghan cultural heritage, both tangible and intangible, including museums, everything. In other words, everything's relevant, everything's interchangeable, everything is relevant, including museums, monuments, archaeological sites, even its music, art, and traditional crafts, and so on. So it's everything is relevant. You can't have irrelevant. Everything has to be relevant. So the United Nations under UNESCO's strategy is to help re-establish the links between the populations concerned and their cultural history. That's what Jessica says. That's what I'm saying. We've got to make sure that people are aware of their common identity and future together. Redesigning a meaning for a history based on fact and not reinvention is what we're talking about. Populations concerned and their cultural history, cultural heritage can become a rallying point for former adversaries, enabling them to rebuild ties and dialogue and redesign a common identity and future together. And I think this is one thing that's lacking in countries that have suffered greatly from warfare, right? And I'm going to say it. Germany has to recognize that it had the Nazi Party. Germany has to recognize that the Nazi Party may have done bad things, but it also did good things. And that is a very, very controversial thing to say. But by identifying a certain area of your past will help solve and cure some of those wounds. You've got to say bad things about the Nazi Party, but you've also got to say good things about it. You've also got to help mend those wounds. And that was very controversial of me to say that. But what I'm trying to say is that we can also sit down the Taliban to have to tie in with the common identity for the future of the Afghan world. And that's exactly what politicians are looking at today. They're trying, as the Nazi Party was abhorrent, the Taliban have been abhorrent. But you've got to bring these areas of history into the modern day and age. And you've got to redesign a common identity, and then you can have a future together. That's what they're hopefully going to do with the Taliban. Whether it works, I don't know. But history, archaeology is key to that common goal. So this all helps everybody to develop a sense of common ownership of monuments that represents a cultural identity and different segments of society. And the Bamiyan statues themselves, the actual blowing up of the Bamiyan statues, are part of Taliban history. But what's left there is part of Buddhist history. Bringing both the Taliban together with the Buddhist mindset is bringing together framework of understanding for the understanding of a common ownership of the past. It is therefore directly linked to nation building, this sense of nation building. We've heard this word nation building a lot. The Americans used it a lot. Let's nation build in Afghanistan, but they did it all wrong. We know that they did it all wrong because they did not base the common goal of the Afghan people based within its culture, based within its history, based within a common sense of identity. The Americans brought, this is politics now, I'm sorry, and I did warn myself not to do this, but what I'm trying to say is that history and archaeology and heritage is key to moving forward. And it's that sense of making a safeguard of this world to be something that's important. Afghanistan is situated, as I said at the beginning, at an important junction on the ancient Silk Road, an important juncture of history, a crossroads of culture since time immemorial. And with that, it's very difficult to think of Afghanistan as being key to the story of Alexander the Great. But it is. It's difficult to understand that there were Greek temples built in Afghanistan as part of the sense of this Hellenistic approach to colonizing Afghanistan. But then again, like any aspect of colonizing Afghanistan, Hellenism and Hellenism and Alexander the Great 300 years ago is as important then as we start to see the Taliban within the history of Afghanistan today. you might be nodding your heads and thinking, this is crazy talk of Karl, but it's not. All of this has got a relevance within the history of building a common history in regards to Afghanistan. Its unique cultural heritage reflects a history that is marked by the complete indigenous encounters between the Persian Empire, for example. The Persian Empire had a bit into Afghanistan before the likes of Alexander the Great within Afghanistan 2,300 years ago. Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, it's all there. So we've got to try and now we've got to try and push smashing of statues in Kabul Museum behind us. We need to now move on with what we've got and to safeguard what we've got. We cannot keep harping back to the past and harping back to a past that can be very, very negative. We've got to harp back to a past that can help us move forward. So this is an important point now, and this is talking about how we can use modern technology in regards to Afghanistan. It's slightly outdated, right? Everything that I'm giving you today is really outdated, other than that one article, because you know it's what has it been? It's been a week since the Taliban took over. I can't. Well, actually, 10 days. It's been 10 days, so I can't. I can only do justice to tell you how important Afghanistan is within the overall mindset of what we're trying to say today. This a nation state, a nation state is alive when its culture stays alive. Now, what we're talking about here, now this is exactly the image that I want to show you. There are 4 Afghanis there, and I'm thinking actually 5 Afghanis there. The guy with the white hair, I think, is Afghani as well. Now, what we're saying is trying to understand Afghanistan using modern day technology, to try and understand the archaeology of Afghanistan using technology that exists. So we've got government satellite imagery that's still up there, the American government satellite imagery. We can monitor the history and archaeology of Afghanistan even when we're not there. And we can use military drones to monitor the history and archaeology of Afghanistan and start to try and convince the Taliban that their history is important. Everyone's history is important. And therefore, we're going to try and make sure, we could try to make the Taliban understand that the culture is something that belongs to everybody. Taliban have said recently that Afghanistan is for everybody. Prove it to us. Prove that you can safeguard the culture and history of this landscape. What they've actually found with this funded project by the US Department of State, the Afghan Heritage Mapping Partnership has tripled the number of recorded archaeological features in Afghanistan to more than 4,500 individual sites. So across Afghanistan, we've got 4,500 archaeological sites identified from across Afghanistan so far, and that's tripled in the past 2 decades. So among the discoveries has been sites going associated with caravan sites associated with the Silk Route, little sort of areas where there would be caravans going back and forth from China, just little sites like that. This gives you an idea of the Silk Route. So little things like that, all the way through to sort of Hellenistic sites, Persian sites before, sites associated with Buddha, sites themselves associated with exploration into the likes of Afghanistan to try and understand the Western influences as early as the late 1500s. And so what we do find is that there the new identification of archaeological sites in the likes of Afghanistan takes us to understanding vast mud brick building complexes that hadn't been recorded before. These mud brick building complexes associated with caravan caravan locations where they would have roadside sort of hotels and so on, all these types of things being identified, 119 sites like that being identified, called caravanserais, locations which are really important to the Silk Route. When you think about it, forget about Afghanistan a minute. The Silk Route itself is integral to East and West. It's massive and it had to go through Afghanistan. Marco Polo wrote about this wonderful Silk Route in the 1300s. He was wandering across this landscape in the 1320s, and it was this very importance of the Silk Route that gives the importance to Afghanistan. And they're finding these mud brick complexes, and you know what, I had image upon image to have showed you tonight, but I just couldn't put it all together because it was just too much. So I was trying to, maybe what I'm going to probably do when things have settled a little bit, look at Afghanistan with a little bit more focus on an individual site. We've been rather all over the place tonight because that's the situation in Afghanistan. So we've got these shelters for hundreds of travelers with their thousands of camels linking this world together back in the day between the great Mughal Empire, for example, the Safavid Empire, the empires of the East and the West. It had been thought that land travel declined after the Portuguese developed trade routes across the Indian Ocean in the 1500s. But what they are seeing is that there's a huge infrastructure of trade across the Afghan landscape going into the 1700s, all the way up until the period of the East India Company, the British East India Company, which would have naturally have seen these localities and the wealth running through the landscape. The Silk Route remained in use, associated with the Safavid Empire, which was up and flowing into the 1600s. So with that all said, I've got this wonderful document in front of me, which I'm hopefully going to be able to go through, hopefully look at some of these images and maybe give a little bit more meat on the bone. So what we've got all these little images I want to show you at the end. Look at that there. Some index cards. They even destroyed the index cards in the Museum of Kabul. But we've got this excavating the destruction of archaeology. Now I want to show you the document that I'm actually going to be looking at, and hopefully if anyone's interested, they can actually find this on the internet. And it's from the University of Chicago, and this actually dates back to 2015, but it does put a few things together. So if I show you this now, and we look at this one. It's known the war-ravaged cultural heritage of Afghanistan, the overview of projects of assessment, mitigation and preservation. So great sites like this, sort of trying to preserve some of these mud pit structures to obviously project these to the world. We have umpteen palaces associated around Kabul that have been blown up since the 1970s, but obviously talking about the earlier archaeology, it's out there for people to look at. So let's have a little look at some of these images that we've actually got. And we've got this little image up here, which hopefully will make some sense. And so see if we can sort of try and get through some of this. I'm going to have to try and make sure I can actually read this. Otherwise I can... Now, again, reinvigorates everything I've said. The crossroads of cultures. This is a landscape. We think about great migrations of people. We talk about the trade and all the rest of it. We talk about the great empires of China and the Persians and so on. It's a very complex history that we see in Afghanistan, and all these contacts gave rise to a rich architectural and a textual landscape. It brings us a great artistic background we see in regard to this sort of world that's massively associated with the Silk Route. And we just don't...
We're meant to be looking at.
Oh, Christ. Oh, right. You haven't got an image. Oh, no. Right. Sorry.
No.
Got it now?
No.
No.
No. Oh, bugger. Right. What? Okay. Now.
No.
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 You don't have an image?
Yes.
No, it's just
we
showing
do.
the top of the image. You know, you have the bin and the heart and the close up. And
Have you got an image now?
This
Yeah.
is
Got-
the
Yeah.
map
got
that
one.
we were
The
looking
map.
at before.
Yes.
Got the map. Yeah.
Bigger
Oh, right,
one.
that's what we need.
With the
Oh,
blue arrows
okay.
on. Yeah.
Oh, but that's what you were looking at anyway.
No.
it wasn't
No, it
showing
was
the
just
map
fine
though.
before. It's just
You've
come up.
made it too big.
Okay.
But you can see the map now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Okay,
Make it
so
a bit
what?
bigger.
Oh, do you know what? Right, you lot are like a bunch of blooming children of 18.
That's better.
Yeah.
That's better.
Uzbekistan.
Right, Uzbekistan, right, Turkmenistan, China, Pakistan, old Indian Empire, Iran, and you've got the Persians and so on, and you've got Afghanistan, the great site of Hada, you've got the Bamiyan statues, there we go. We've got we go all the way over to the border as well, and we think about Hellenism, and we think about the exchange between along the Silk Route. There's the Bamiyan, so the Silk Route is coming from China all the way across into the northern part of Iran, and you can see the interchange of all this with the sort of modern day Russia, and old Russia as well. These places are Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and so on. And you've got the old world of India and trade associated with that further goer as well, and so on. So you start to go into the Pacific further south. So again, this sort of interchange and cross-cultural understandings of the great landscape. And this sort of, I haven't mentioned too much beyond the Persian interchange in regards to this landscape, but we can talk about trade links must have existed associated with Afghanistan up to 4,000 years BC. And one of the things before silk was being traded, we've got the likes of lapis lazuli being exchanged extensively. Great amounts of lapis lazuli. That sort of wonderful blue stone comes from Afghanistan. So this is one of the things that's been traded all the way around. So, and obviously it would have eventually gone along the Silk Road route. And just think of this in the period of the Romans as well. We've got to check the Romans in here. Roman goods going along the Silk Route. First of all, going out of the Roman Empire into the Persian world, and then going into Afghanistan along the Silk Route. Roman goods like glass bowls and so on from Syria ended up in China on all these wonderful things. Interchange between these great sort of the Han Dynasty, sort of the link between, we've got Roman material on Han Dynasty sites, and then we've got goods exchanged from the Chinese world, like the silks, into Roman sites. So this is all massively really important stuff. So we have mentioned about sort of all this sort of interchange, and I think the biggest thing coming up is about war having an absolutely massive effect. But even still, we do still have enough of Afghanistan to hopefully learn and help the people to learn from Afghanistan. And now what they're doing, they're sort of seeing these great, the vast majority of thousands of artifacts coming out of Afghanistan. It's smuggling. There's so many artifacts getting out of Afghanistan, but they're being stopped at some airports like Heathrow. Thousands and thousands of artifacts are being confiscated at Heathrow every single year, meaning that they're not going into the trade, and therefore these monuments themselves are not being sold at auctions and so on. So the most notorious examples of war-related monument destruction, as we know, in regards to the Taliban, and the next image that we're going to actually show you is associated with tribute bearers from Bactria depicted on Persepolis relief. So basically what we've got, if I show you this next image, so we've got Persepolis. I've got Persepolis. I don't know what I just said then. We got the links of Persepolis and coming from Bactria. So we've got the ancient Greek world city of Persepolis, and we've got trade indicated from Afghanistan 300 years before the birth of Christ. And we've got this sort of indications of this trade being portrayed at these temple sites within the Greek world, from goods coming from Afghanistan, associated then later on with this great silk trade route. And this is what this is actually portraying in front of us. It's a rather interesting piece of art. So tribute bearers from Bactria depicted on Persepolis reliefs. And what we do find is the next image. Artworks like this are being seized by the British military, and we'll just show you this next image coming up now. So what we've got, we're intercepting these goods going on to that international trade market. There it is. We'll explain what this is about now. So British military forces repatriating to Afghanistan 3.4 tons of smuggled Afghan antiquities that had been confiscated at Heathrow Airport, London. So these have gone back to Afghanistan in about 2017, and we don't really know what the fates of these are going to be. So this is an interesting point. I've mentioned the National Museum of Afghanistan a few times being extensively looted. And again, I'm really hoping that this doesn't happen again. The National Museum of Afghanistan was the depository of goods from 1921. And the NMA, National Museum of Afghanistan, is thought to have housed approximately, wait for it, up until 1979, 200,000 individual objects at the time of the Soviet invasion. Although no full inventory of the museum's holdings have ever been conducted, some idea of the museum's pre-war holdings can be gained by the National Museum of Afghanistan's guides, because they would have produced guides. So we got an idea. During the post-Soviet Civil War from 1989 to 1996, the museum sat at the front between the territories controlled by rival factions, Mujahideen factions. And then in 1996, the Taliban moved in. Over a period of months, the museum was rocketed, shelled, set on fire, and subjected to frequent raids by looters. During this period, an estimated, wait for it, 70% of the museum's collections, approximately 140,000 objects, were looted or destroyed. This astonishing scale of loss should be considered in comparison with any major wars that we can actually see. So if we actually compare this, right, 140,000 objects looted or destroyed. If we compare this with the Baghdad Museum, which lost approximately 15,000 objects in looting that followed the US invasion of Baghdad in 2003, the losses in regards to the Afghan Museum are massive. In addition to the loss of objects, approximately 90% of the objects recorded in the museum registry were burned. So many of these can never be recovered. So on the basis of consultations between religious leaders, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan's religious judgment of these artifacts was said that these are objects of the unbelievers and should be destroyed. But actually, one bit of the story hasn't been given. So the goods that the artifacts that the Taliban destroyed in whilst they controlled Afghanistan before 2001, there were actually protests by religious leaders and legal scholars from other countries in the Islamic world saying that the Taliban, this is wrong with the Taliban doing this. This is against the teachings of the Holy Book. This is against the teachings of the Holy Word of Islam. People are saying it's been interpreted wrongly. It's been interpreted really, really wrongly. So again, what I'm going to do is actually show you the images of the statues again. So if we want to go back to these again. So what we're trying to say is that the Taliban actually got it wrong. They did get it wrong. It was for the reasons that I've said earlier on. It was for more political reasons than actual religious reasons. So what they're desperately trying to do now is get an archive together. They're still trying to get the archive together, even though everything's gone wrong in Afghanistan. They're still trying to get things wrong. Documentation, mitigation, and trying to really work things out. Current attempts to address the wartime damage to Afghanistan fall into three broad categories. Documentation. What documentation have we got there? Can we really improve the records that we've got on Afghanistan with what we've got? Now, this is really important. This is really important because in many museums in Britain, we really don't know what we've got. Time and memorial, well, not every week, but at least every month, there's a new report saying, oh, something in a museum's just recently been studied and we found this about it and it's been in a museum for 70 years. Right, so we've got the same problem in our museums, but what they're saying in Afghanistan is more and more important because we need to get those records. We need to photograph things before they're blown up and destroyed, right? If they're going to be blown up and destroyed, at least we've got a record of them. So we've got to get some kind of mitigation. What can we restore? What can we display? So little archaeological work has been done in Afghanistan, actually. Not a lot has been done, really. When you think about it, we've got 4,500 identifiable sites in Afghanistan, right? Afghanistan itself is much bigger than Britain, right? And in Britain, I can probably tell you that in England alone, we've got hundreds of thousands of identifiable archaeological sites, hundreds of thousands, right? So Afghanistan is behind, right? But we're hopefully trying to, what's going to happen is we're going to try and keep this process going of what we can record. Whether the Taliban are there or not, we're going to continue doing this because we've now got the technology to do it remotely. Right, the challenge of documenting and mitigating damage to heritage, so trying to reduce the damage that's being caused to heritage, that's what mitigation means, is far greater than in better known countries and archaeological regions such as Iraq and Syria. So in other words, what we've got to do, we've got to really get on with things. So documentation is key. Getting records is key. So it's been very useful that we knew what the Bamiyan statues looked like. We'd well photographed, recorded it. So this is why, when they were blown up, we could basically project a hologram of what the Bamiyan statues looked like up until recent times. I'm presuming that the Taliban has stopped the light show in regards to the empty crevice there. I'm presuming that, but hopefully I'm right. Because the Taliban are going to need to rebuild their economy. And again, I'm going to apologize if this has been too political today. I really promised, but I've struggled. So I'm going to show you something else as well, another image, right? This isn't all depressing. I'm saying there's hope, actually. I am actually saying there's hope. We can do something, right? Taliban damage to a Gandhara. We've all heard of Gandhara. Gandhara dated to about 300 years AD. Sculptures of the Buddha from the Hadan monastery complex in southeastern Afghanistan. The Gandhara period saw the earliest figural depictions of the Buddha. So there we go. So you can see that there's damage to these carvings, right? But we are hopefully going to turn another corner, right? And we're going to try and just try and get things right. So the main task is clear at the level of archaeological sites. We've got to try and record archaeological sites. This is another thing. We're going to try and record these archaeological sites remotely, or at least some work, right? And hopefully, have I got the right image? Yes, I have. There we go. Hopefully, what we can do is we've got to get out there and record as much as we possibly can before the looting. This is crucial. This is really, really crucial. And this project has been going on for quite some time. And what we are doing is hopefully all of what we do have will build a very much more powerful database. And then you can go to the government of Afghanistan and say, this is your history. We have recorded it. It's very important you preserve this for all the people of Afghanistan. let's just show you another image coming up. So obviously restorations of this type of work. There we go. So excavating museum archives. So getting these things out and actually photographing them and recording them. So in other words, if these items are found on the black market, we can trace them back to Kabul. We can trace them back to Afghanistan. So this is really, really important. Cross-referencing this database is again key to at least making what's left very, very relevant to the Afghanistani people. So what they've tried to really do is they've tried to do lots of reconstruction work, and there's something known as the Babur Persian style garden in the heart of Kabul, built by the first Mughal Empire Babur in the 1500s. The garden is notable for a number of small architectural gems, such as a tomb of Babur and the small mosque of Babur's great grandson, Shah Jahan, who later built the Taj Mahal. So relevance, we're looking at some relevance between Afghanistan and India. The garden was devastated in battles between Mujahideen groups in 1989 to 1996. What we've then started to do is actually preserve some of these landscapes since, and actually, hopefully, with this garden that they restored in Kabul, this historical garden dating back to the 1500s, and the great grandson Shah Jahan, who later built the Taj Mahal, there has been millions of people visiting these sites in Kabul, and actually the meaning not of the Bamir statues and other sites such as this could bring some meaning to this world, and obviously, hopefully, this meaning to this world will bring some tourist revenue back to Afghanistan. It's not a place that I'd want to go to, but again, it's money. That's what the Afghan government needs to survive. It might see that there's a golden cow to be gained from in regards to the heritage of Afghanistan. So if you're not going to use it to educate, use it to bring in the tourist revenue. I think both works the same way. So burned object inventory cards from National Museum of Afghanistan. As we know, 90% of the museum's record destroyed during the post-Soviet Afghan Civil War, 1989, but we're trying to put some of it together. So I'm going to show you another image here. It's known as the Red List of Afghanistan. Okay, so here we go. We'll have a look at this one. Yeah, here we go. We'll zoom in on this. The red list includes the following categories of objects. So what this basically is that these objects are wanted back. There's a list. There's a list out there. Some of their very early pottery there. And we've got lots of copper objects coming in there. These have all been the early metal objects. This is all to do with the wonderful past of Afghanistan, and looking at again things that you think, oh right, this is all part of Afghanistani culture. These three-leg jars, all these things have gone missing, and they want these things back. And sooner or later, they will get these objects back. And I'm really looking for what the response is from the new rulers of Afghanistan to this. Are they going to use this as a cash cow and actually bring tourists into the country, get their museums open? And that will be great. So at least it'll mean a way of showing off to the world how great Afghanistan is. This is what we need to do. So again, it's got a little bit of a red list for people to look out for, to really understand what's going on, and it's what's needed. It's what's needed to sort of show off. So this is what we have. So I want to show you a close-up of one of the sites that is being looted, and I've suddenly realized it's 9:44. So we've gone a little bit too far over. So what I'm going to do is quickly go with what we've got now. sort of, let's just show another little bit of an image in here. I've gone a little bit further over. What they're doing is they've got a the Camel laboratory image showing site locations from the 1982 archaeological corrected through comparison, and this sort of gives an idea of what type of sites are being looted. And the way they're able to do that, so they're using this imagery, and there you have they're showing images from 1982. So the 1982 images, they're saying, look, you know, we haven't got much looting. And now in 2010, you've got the image on the left, which is low resolution aerial photographic LiDAR, and on the right is high resolution looting at a site known as Kanum. And Kanum shows a high level of looting up to 2010. So what they're desperately trying to do is model these landscapes so that we can learn about them before they're looted, or we can gain an idea how much the damage is causing to these sites. I think the best thing to think about these sites is to try and get out there and to try and sample the archaeology before it's all looted and it goes out into the middle of nowhere. So I want to show you another image of some goods that have been taken from the Kabul Museum. And I'm going to read out something that is overlooked at the end here. I've missed out loads of stuff in this document, but you can have a little read yourselves. I did show you the title. Look at these here. This is some text. These date from around 100 years AD. These are one of the earliest known inscriptions in the Bactrian script. We mentioned the Bactrian world, the trade between the Bactrian people, Persepolis before the Bactrian world, the Bactrian script, a modified version of the Greek alphabet. So in other words, the Greeks have gone in there with Hellenism, Alexander the Great into Afghanistan. You've got the sort of own localized Bactrian form of writing that's modified into the Greek alphabet. And that's what we're actually looking at. And what they've done, they've got these images, and unfortunately, blocks of these inscriptions are now missing, presumably looted from the National Museum during the Afghan War between 1989. So what they're trying to do, so what you can see is the ones in the boxes are the bits that are missing, right, through trade and all the rest of the damage. But again, we've got these records now. We've got an idea what this Bactrian script is about. And then finally, I'd like to mention as well what is very, very relevant, and we'll just call it a day on this. One final category of cultural heritage is easily overlooked: intangible heritage, art, music, poetry, folklore, language, and knowledge of traditional crafts. Now, again, this is as valuable as the archaeology and history. Far from being secondary, intangible heritage is at its heart the cultural knowledge that gives meaning to the more general recognized tangible heritage objects, such as the Babylonian statues, such as the pottery, such as the copper objects, and so on. So it's not secondary. Intangible heritage is at its heart the cultural knowledge that gives this sort of meaning to monuments and sites in Afghanistan. The past 4 decades of war and the attendant mass dislocations of millions of people have severed the intergenerational links through which intangible heritage and cultural knowledge are passed along from parent to child and from master to apprentice. So in other words, this is oral history, trying to record all this. And the initiatives have been to go out there to record what people are saying. All the stuff that we take for granted in the West. Yeah, we've taken them for too much granted in the West. And we had loads of First World War veterans still alive in the 1980s. We didn't record what they said in many cases. and all we've got is snippets of history. So what we've got to do is now go out there and record what these people are saying before all this history is placed into insignificance. We've got to make what's out there in Afghanistan relevant so that we can present this to the new rulers of Afghanistan to actually give identity and meaning to everybody. And this is the importance of the archaeologist and historian, to give meaning to a country that is developing. Let's see hope in Afghanistan and not what we're seeing in the media. Let's use the past and its heritage to hopefully enhance Afghanistan, to give it some direction. And hopefully that's my hope for Afghanistan, using its history to illuminate the future of Afghanistan. So, right, anybody would like to say anything? Hopefully that's been an inspiration at the end. Anne?
Yes.
Inspirational at the end?
Identity.
Yeah, go on.
And the preserving of that. And you mentioned, the loss of, say, either Germany or Afghanistan, of because of war and loss, they have to come to terms with that. Yes. But I wonder how far archaeology can help with the myths, because the winners write the history.
Let's not let them do it.
It has nothing to do with it. I wondered whether
no, what I mean, let's not let them do it. Let's try and learn from everything and try and change something now.
They do that, but then that becomes part of that. Those myths become part of the culture of the winners.
Yes.
And yet it may not be the truth that we're trying to find in terms of history. That's what I'm saying. And would archaeology eventually feel that truth?
I think archaeology has to feel that truth now. We can't wait around. We've got to do it now. Yeah. We can't allow Afghanistan to lose something that is of world importance. Yeah. Yeah. It's our duty to let's just forget about what's happened in Afghanistan. It's our duty to allow the Afghanistani people see their own value. Yeah. And we can only help with the technology that we've got to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Right, Peter.
No, not a lot really, except that sadly now, since the Taliban's taken over and they're so involved in their own religion, yes, that anything which exists in Afghanistan which comes against their religion, they may well destroy it.
We've got to stop them doing that. We've got to make them see.
I don't know how we can, but
money. They need tourism. They need tourism. Let's tell them that they're museums.
Understand that.
Exactly.
But they're so fanatical about their religion that I'm afraid they might well destroy things.
Right. It just makes it totally irrational, doesn't it? The religion.
It does. It does.
Absolutely.
I'm saying how important Afghanistan is. It is very important. And if you ever do see the film, The Man Who Would Be King, you will know, I know that's fantasy, but Rudyard Kipling was talking from some fact, right? We need to then see the value of history, and we need to, it's not telling the Afghanistani people to do something. They know, they see the value of their history. We've seen them. Now we've got to allow them to empower themselves to do that. It's like the race for women to have the same empowerment as men, right? It's exactly the same with the people of Afghanistan. Drina.
No. It was very interesting. It was.
Thank you. And do you know what? I'm going to do the same as I did last week, right? With David. Dave, I'm going to say it the other way around. David, if you've got to go now, thank you for joining us tonight. But is there anything you want to say?
No, it's fine. Thanks, Carl.
Good. And next week, by the way, we haven't finished doing everyone's questions. We've got 3 to go. But next week, we're going to be looking at early Norman castles and native castles. And that's what we're going to be doing next week, looking at from the point of view we'll be doing the Roman stuff, sort of reuse of material and so on. So that's what we're going to be doing next week. Andy.
No, I don't know. There's nothing to add, really, is because it's a shame. We kind of almost feel helpless.
Yes.
That,
don't feel helpless.
No, but we're all, in a way, or every nation's guilty of doing it, as we do it in our own country.
Yes, we do
on a smaller scale, but not on such a massive scale as this. But
no.
But, yeah.
Well, all I can give is the example of Denmark. Everything in Denmark's protected.
Right.
Even a tree that was used as a scratching post for a cow known as Nelly 150 years ago, that people have been putting ribbons in, and it is very important to the village that's still there. Do you know what I mean? You don't have. I don't agree with this statement. You can't stop progress. You have to stop progress, because if you keep going, you'll never reach the moon because you've got no foundations.
Yeah.
Margaret.
I just think if they ever let Westerners in, are all that we're going to see 3D light projections of what used to be there?
Well, that we've got to make sure that that's not the only thing. Exactly. And that's the point.
Have UNESCO not got any influence over?
UNESCO have got massive influence, but unfortunately, UNESCO are a United Nations body, which we're hopefully the Taliban will be recognizing that. I think we've got to give these clowns some time to sort of indicate that they're not clowns, and hopefully there is some hope. Oh, okay. I made a video recently on the totally absent Afghan army. It never existed, and I put proof and everything in that video, and lots of people have said I'm right and so on and whatever. And the point being, the point of that video was that I was getting very frustrated with the lack of real credible evidence, right? And there is no credible evidence at this moment to tell me that the that the Taliban government will start destroying its museums again. I haven't seen any evidence at all. There's been no mass massacres in the street, right? Of Taliban the Taliban army massacring tens of thousands of Afghan soldiers because they never existed in the first place. There's lots of things that there's no evidence for, right? Let's just give them some time, and if they've got it wrong and they start blowing things up, then okay. But I think we need to give them an opportunity to prove their worth. Just give them 6 months and tell me I'm wrong, right? But I think we need to give them that chance, right? There have been African countries like Nigeria 30 years ago was a hellhole. Now look at Nigeria today, right? We've got to give these people a chance. Jessica says, lapis lazuli is my favorite gemstone. However, I think it should be boycotted at this moment as the Taliban has taken over the mines to fund their regime. Again, they've got to, they've got civil servants out there that they need to pay. How are they going to get the revenue to pay their civil servants? We've got to think. Yeah. Jessica, anything you'd like to say?
No, it is something that interests me. I think seeing the destruction of culture, it is part of war. And we've seen it with lots of different cultures and races. It has happened. And I do think it's almost like a cultural cleansing in a way. You're leaving these people with no home to go back to. And I think it causes this psychological trauma in a way, because they've gone through so much, these people. And I think you can't paint everyone in the same brush. I think there are Afghanis out there that are upset with the same issues as us. And yes. I think it is going to psychologically affect communities, because this is irreplaceable, unique archaeology.
Yes.
And when it does get back onto his feet, people are going to be frustrated and angry that this has been taken away from them.
Yes.
And it causes more violence and unrest. It's a very complex cycle. I think that we need to get our heads around and find a very good solution to try and work through it. But unfortunately, the Taliban are the sort of people that only want what goes by their ideologies, and it is heartbreaking to see. I think at the moment, I think we should protect what we have until it's proven that it will be protected. But like I said, it's just a complex situation. I do think internationally this goes against a lot of laws. But then at the same time, what I've learned in my covert operations module in my politics course in uni was that if a country is that self-reliant and they don't care about what other countries feel like, they can go about whatever they want to do. If they're self-sufficient, it doesn't matter if they're not having trade, it doesn't matter if they're not having people supporting them, because they're self-sufficient and they can do whatever they want. So it's trying to work with them in a way that shows them how important this is, and how it doesn't matter if it doesn't fit your ideology. This is history. This is something that you cannot get rid of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I completely agree. And one thing I would say is that actually the Taliban have got more to lose if they start blowing things up, because they have got more to lose if they start doing that. They've got people like the Mujahideen who will not put up with this. People trained by the CIA. There are things that will happen, and I think the heritage. I think this time maybe the heritage will stand the test of time. Prove me I'm wrong in 6 months' time, but hopefully I'm not wrong.
And I think that another thing is it's the same thing that we see with I've forgotten now, with the Mauche civilization, that the looting that we're having there, the people were looting for a good reason to themselves, and once they were involved in the archaeology and history, once they were involved in the tourism, they showed love for it. And I think the people love it anyway. It's just that I think another reason why people aren't speaking out, they're scared. It's almost like what happened with Nazi Germany, why people didn't speak out so much, was that they felt like they were a minority in the way that they were thinking. And so they didn't speak up, when really they were the majority. Is just that
they were scared. Exactly.
Extreme groups, when they come together, they become more extreme. And I think that's one thing that worries me, is that could the Taliban be more extreme now because they've had a bit of an ego boost with what's going on?
And what I'm going to say, Jess, right? Let's be positive. Let's hope you're wrong. Okay, then. On that note, if anyone else want to say anything before we finish? No. Okay. No. That's been good. I'll see you whoever tomorrow, and Jess will see whoever. Anyway, many thanks for joining us tonight. That's been a good one. That's been quite intense. So next week it'll be softer. So softer for Pete's hair. See you, Pete, and wonderful Anne and Andy and Margaret and Drina and Jess, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.
Bye.
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 Thanks, Andy. Andy, don't forget your money next year.
Okay.
Take care.
That was a good one, Carl. I like that. It brought a bit of politics into it. I got really excited, as you could see from my messages.
I could. Anyway, anything you'd like to say quickly, because I got to give someone a ring.
No, could you just send the images over, and that is perfect. And I'll see you tomorrow.
Oh yeah, I'll send the images over now.
Oh, perfect, Carl.
Hang on a minute. As we do, right? As we do. And...
Oh, Carl, I've thought of something, and I know it's probably really obvious. But this was something that just came into my head in the middle of the night last night. I had to write it down. But this whole argument of Wales before the Normans came about, there was no development. There was a gradual decline. Then why was the Normans so interested in Wales? And from what I've read from historians, is that the Normans wanted to get through Wales first, because that was the key to taking over the whole of the country.
Yes.
So Wales, I think, was more powerful than what is being let on.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah, there's no point taking a country that you see is weak and backwards and no influence at all. But the Normans really saw the importance of Wales.
Yes, there is something in that. Otherwise, you may as well. capturing a rock which has no value exactly. So anyway.
Exactly. It was very, it stares you in the face, but I had to write it down, otherwise I thought I was going to forget about it.
Oh no, that's quite valuable. That is. Okay then, I'm gonna. Is there anything else before we go?
No, that was perfect. Thank you, Carl. I really enjoyed tonight.
I say good. I sent the images over.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Take care.
Anyway, look after yourself, Jessica. Take care.
And you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye. Bye. Take care. Okay, thanks for joining us tonight. This is being out live on YouTube. I don't know if anyone's still watching on YouTube. Few things to do still tonight. And what have we got there? Theo's still watching. Right, okay, nobody else watching now. Anyway, thanks for watching on YouTube, and I'm going to call this night Arrivederci. Don't forget to like and subscribe and so on. And don't forget, if you're interested, join us online. So I'll put the details on there quickly. And that will be calling it a night. Okay. Archaeology Cymru. There you go. Thank you very much. Details to join the classes, Archaeology Cymru, online.weebly.com. Thank you very much. Good night. Like and subscribe.